Yo, what is up guys? This is ShinobiEevee here back again with another video for you guys, and today we're going to be going over basically what a Bankai is. So if you guys are definitely interested in Bleach or the content to come, so you guys can be ready for the 1,000-year Blood War arc, then please definitely leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get straight into this.
昔の俺を見てるようだな。まったくだ。一丁教えてやろうぜ。俺は今この世に。
Now, before we even talk about the Bankai, we of course have to talk about the stage before it, because of course Bankai is the second stage, which we're going to be calling Shikai. So, first stage before the Bankai is Shikai, or the initial release, and in order to activate it, basically, the person in charge of that Zanpakuto has to learn the true name of their Zanpakuto. Now, obviously, you don't just pick the name, or if you thought you did, that's not how it works. In order for you guys to be able to get your own Bankai, or even your own Shikai, you have to learn the name of the spirit of the Zanpakuto, basically. Another requirement is also being able to speak with the spirit of that Zanpakuto effectively in its own world, like you'd be seeing Ichigo do when he goes into the world, but in his case, he had both Zangetsu and his hollow self in there, so that's a whole different case on its own. And then afterwards, after you get done learning what your Shikai's name is, or your Zanpakuto's name is, for most Soul Reapers, they have an initial command that, brings out their Shikai's main power, or their just initial release, which you have seen before. And of course, for the most part, when it comes to the Zanpakuto's initial release, in some form or fashion, it does relate to the ability they have. With Toshiro, it was his Ice Bankai, or something having to do with ice, because that's the element he controlled inside of his Zanpakuto at that point. Ruki, of course, was the same way, having the second Ice Bankai, or Ice Shikai in this case. So there was that as well. There's only one exception so far that we've seen in, well, two actually. Kenpachi Zaraki being the only one who hasn't really even learned the name of his Zanpakuto. And of course, Ichigo, whose Zanpakuto actually stayed in its Shikai form, or in its release state, pretty much throughout the whole entire anime. Another thing to note is that not all Zanpakuto in the release state are all katanas, or swords like you usually see all the random other Soul Reapers be having. In some cases, they can be spears. Another case could be holding two swords in a row, as we've seen before. Other weapons also could be including a stinger, which Soifon has, Hikaku holding the spear. You got Umeda basically holding a flail, or whatever that rock is with the spikes on it, honestly. And of course, one of my favorites, Shuhei with two dual sights, which is really, really cool. I'm not gonna lie to you on that one. And there's even a Soul Reaper who has a trident, which is pretty neat if you do say so myself. So there are a huge variety of weapons that you can be using with this. But for the most part, you have to complete the whole entire chant of your Zanpakuto in order for you to be able to get the best ability out of it, especially with Zangetsu, which is Ichigo's Zanpakuto, who taught him the Getsuga Tensho. Now that we know all about the Shikai, now it is in time to introduce Bankai, or the final release. Most of the time, the Bankai is also the last resort used by most Soul Reapers, which is why for the most part you don't really see them activated at will, unless under dire circumstances. Now, Bankais, for the most part, they vary from user to user depending on the ability of their Shikai. Like I said before, for Toshiro, his Shikai had basically an ice type ability, or something to have to do with ice. So his Bankai was pretty much a most improved version of that in a more powerful form. As we've already seen, with Toshiro's Bankai being the fact that he has ice wings on his entire body, his hands, his feet, and his sword also. Other uses of this technique called Bankai, or the second stage release, would be of course Ichigo, Byakuya, Renji, Toshiro, Rukia, Shansui, Unohara, Kenpachi, Unohara Kisuke, and Miuri as well. And as we already know, Bankais will vary from power to power, from user to user, as well as all the abilities that they do have. There are even variations, like a modified Bankai, which Miuri has, and also Unohara has, or a Holified Bankai, which for the most part we've already seen, Ichigo Kurosaki or any of the visors use. For weaknesses, the only two weaknesses that we currently know of for Bankais or breaking to the point where it will never return to its former state, where there are circumstances with Renji and of course Ichigo's or Kumamura's, or the Stern Raiders' powers in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, which allowed them to seal or steal some of the Bankais from the users that they went against. Other, disadvantages of some Bankais could be another one canceling out another, as in the case of when Yamamoto used his Bankai, or his true, basically, power. Toshiro could not use any of the ice in the surrounding area due to the fact that Yamamoto's Bankai was so hot to the point where there was no water in the air, causing the stolen Bankai from Toshiro not to work against him. With all the talk of getting the Bankai, there is a little bit of a catch to getting it. So, in order for you to get a Bankai, a Soul Reaper must typically train up to around 10 years, unlike in Ichigo's case where he did it in 7 days, and he has to be able to subjugate and materialize their Zanpakuto spirit into the real world, which means that afterwards, they must complete additional training to fully master their Bankai before it's used in combat. As we've already seen, Toshiro's Bankai in the Soul Society arc was not exactly the strongest, and he had to train it more even after Aizen was defeated so that he could be able to achieve its full and divine power. Also, another thing to note is the spirit also learns Bankai at the same point that the Soul Reaper does, which is why when Ichigo went to his spirit before, after learning Bankai, not only did Zangetsu already learn how to use it, but on top of that, his hollow self also knew how to use it as well, because he learned Bankai along with the Getsuga Tensho at the same time. Another thing we also must note about Bankai is also the fact that the Shinigami, or the spirit inside the sword, can lower the power of the Bankai if it does find its wielder unworthy of using it. And so far, this might be the case as a theory. This might be the case in the case of Aizen and his Bankai. We've never seen him use his Bankai, or just never seen him release his sword to its second state. Not that he needs to at this point, because he's powerful enough as it is. But there might be a case that his Shikai might not find him worthy of the Bankai, which is why we probably never seen him use it, but just a theory to keep in thought. And as for the power of Bankai, well, we already know that for the most part, according to Yoruichi, that a Bankai's power can be multiplied up to 5 to 10 times depending on the user, and on top of that, if it can be trained, it can get even stronger than that. Also, Bankai will get weaker depending on the Shinigami that is using it, or if they will it to get weaker or on the verge of death. So there is also that as well. So if you're not strong enough, your Bankai might go back to its base form. One thing I want to talk about also with the Bankais is it seems that there is another state above Bankai that both only Ichigo and Aizen have reached, and we saw that in the final battle of Karakura Town, where they both had their Zanpakutos that were merged with their arms. For Ichigo, this seemed like, as we would call it, his Dangai state, where he basically merged with his Zanpakuto, he merged with Zangetsu, and his final state above that was even called Mugetsu, so there was that. And with Aizen in particular, he had the Hogyoku inside of him, so with that, he was also merging with his own sword, as he said in the final fight before he got sealed. And even while sealed, while his power was growing in the final fight with Yuha and also Ichigo and the others, he also was able to pull out his Zanpakuto at will. So, and on top of that, he also was able to use the Zanpakuto's abilities to kill the Shigetsu, but just by sitting in the chair. So crazy stuff going on right there. And with the Hellverse and also the Thousand Year Blood War coming out, I hope to see any new stuff coming from Kubo that we didn't see before, talking about the Zanpakuto and their long history. But without further ado, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content. This is going to be ShinobiEevee signing off.